Good evening. We'll focus on that crucial meeting between Donald Trump and Israel's Benjamin Netanyahu in a moment, but let's begin the programme in Sweden, 125 miles west of Stockholm, where 10 people have been killed in a mass shooting at an adult education centre. The lone gunman was not known to police, and terror is not being described as a motive. Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi reports.
As the gunman started shooting, students fled. They are clearly terrified. Others hid in their classrooms, barricading the doors.
Oh my God!
Police? Those caught up in the violence feared they'd not get out alive.
We were sitting and hiding under the tables in the classroom, and we heard loud bangs. After maybe 2 hours, the police came, and when they took us out from the classroom, when I passed the entrance to the school, I looked down and there was blood everywhere.
A guy next to me was shot in the shoulder. He was bleeding a lot. When I looked behind me, I saw 3 people on the floor bleeding. Everyone was shocked. They said, "Go out, get out." Me and my friend tried to save the life of this person. People were very shocked. The police were not on site, and neither was the ambulance. So we had to help. I took my friend's shawl and tied it tightly around his shoulder so that he wouldn't bleed so much.
Helicopters could be seen flying overhead as response teams scrambled to the location. Armed police soon arrived on the scene. The authorities say the suspect was not previously known to them.
We now know that around 10 people died here today. We cannot provide more specific details at this time due to the extent of the damage. We still believe we have the primary perpetrator in custody, although we're not ruling out the involvement of others. He is not known to the police from before and has no connections to any gang. Based on what we know, we believe he acted alone.
The violence has once again raised questions about the growing levels of gun violence in Sweden. It has the highest gun crime death rate in the European Union.
We have witnessed brutal, deadly violence against completely innocent people. Many questions remain unanswered, and I cannot provide those answers either. But the time will come when we will know what happened, how it could occur, and what motives may have been behind it. Let us not speculate.
It may be a few days before a clearer picture emerges of the shooter's motive, as investigators continue their work. But this is already the country's worst mass shooting. Alex Rossi, Sky News.
Well, let's focus now on those talks due to begin any minute now in Washington. Donald Trump likes to think of himself as the man who gets things done. He strong-armed Canada and Mexico into taking action to stop drugs being sent across America's border. He told Israel to agree to a ceasefire deal before his inauguration. And soon he'll sit down with the Israeli Prime Minister to plot out the future of Gaza. In the past hour, he appeared to give a hint of his vision for the Strip, suggesting that Palestinians have no alternative but to leave while it is being rebuilt, and saying that Jordan and Egypt should accept the displaced. How will that go down in the region? And just how tough is the president's plan to contain Iran? Well, there's a lot to discuss tonight, but first, Benjamin Netanyahu will soon arrive at the White House. And as we've said, he is the first foreign leader to do so. And we are waiting for him to arrive. You're looking at those live images of the White House, where Donald Trump has just signed a series of executive orders and is waiting for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to arrive, his first foreign leader since becoming president of the United States. And of course, for Benjamin Netanyahu, his first trip to Washington since that ICC arrest warrant was also issued. But before those talks, Donald Trump has been signing more executive orders tonight. Perhaps the most striking were on Iran, which he said would resume maximum pressure to stop the country developing nuclear weapons. He was also asked what could happen if Iran were to assassinate him. Just have a look.
We will see whether or not we can arrange or work out a deal with Iran.
and everybody can live together, and maybe that's possible, and maybe it's not possible. So I'm signing this, and I'm unhappy to do it, but I really have not so much choice because we have to be strong and firm, and I hope that it's not going to have to be used in any great measure at all. It'd be great if we could have a Middle East and maybe a world at total peace. Right now you don't have that. When I left, you had peace all over the world, and now you have the world is blowing up. As you know, Bibi is coming in to see me later. Others are coming in to see me. We'll see what we can do. But I'm signing this, and hopefully it will be a document which won't be very important, will hardly have to be used.
So what kind of deal would you be prepared to make?
Well, we're going to see. I mean, we're going to see. They cannot have a nuclear weapon. With me, it's very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. We don't want to be tough on Iran. We don't want to be tough on anybody, but they just can't have a nuclear weapon.
Mr. President, are you going to engage in conversations with your counterpart in Iran?
I would.
Do you want to block the sale of Iranian oil to other nations?
Well, we have the right to do that, and that's what I did before, and they had no money. They wouldn't have had the money for Hamas or Hezbollah or anybody else. It could have been solved. This thing, it just, if things went the way they should have, this would have been over long ago, but it's not over.
How close do you think Iran is to developing a nuclear weapon?
I think they're close. I think they're close. They're too close. But again, you could go back 4 years, I would have said they would have had it during this intervening period. But they're pretty close, Peter.
And why say that you're unhappy to sign it if it's Iran and their proxies who have threatened to retaliate against you and your team by killing you guys for taking out Soleimani?
Well, they haven't done that, and that would be a terrible thing for them to do, not because of me. If they did that, they would be obliterated. That would be the end. I've left instructions. If they do it, they get obliterated. There won't be anything left. And they shouldn't be able to do it. And Biden should have said that, but he never did. I don't know why, lack of intelligence, perhaps. But he never said it.
Donald Trump speaking there a little earlier. Let's go straight to our US correspondent, Mark Stone, who's at the White House for us. So, Mark, tough words there for Iran, no surprises. Interesting, the timing just ahead of Benjamin Netanyahu's arrival.
Yeah, and three distinct focuses for this, the first foreign leader to visit Donald Trump here at the White House since the inauguration. Benjamin Netanyahu will be here shortly. Iran, clearly a key focus. The normalization deal that Trump set in play in his first presidency with Saudi Arabia, and of course Gaza, and all of those three are inextricably linked. Depending on how progress on those three issues go, progress on another of them could fall apart. Let's give you a sense of the pomp here, because I can't remember the last time I saw the White House decked out like this with the US military, a guard of honor on what's known as Pebble Beach, the driveway that leads from the gates of the north lawn of the White House as we move the camera around towards the West Wing. And you can see as we go further around the number of media gathered here, a huge contingent of the media here. Because all of us, Yalda, are following every moment of this presidency, because every moment seems to produce a headline, and I'm sure over the course of the next couple of hours we will get a few headlines, and they will of course be all about the Middle East. There will be questions for Donald Trump about Gaza, questions about what happens to the people in Gaza. There's been an awful lot of talk over the past few weeks and indeed over the past few hours here in the White House about this plan, as it seems to be, to rebuild Gaza, and in the process of rebuilding Gaza, to move the people of Gaza somewhere else. You remember a couple of days ago, Donald Trump was asked whether Egypt and Jordan might take people from Gaza. He said they will, even though they've said they won't. King Abdullah is due to be here next week, the King of Jordan, so I imagine that will be a focus of their talks as well. Of course, For Palestinians, there is a haunting history, effectively, potentially being repeated here. If they are requested, if they're told they need to leave Gaza, because on the face of it, Gaza needs to be rebuilt and they can't be there because, as the Americans have said, it is completely flattened, then they believe they will never be allowed to come home again. So that is a very, very difficult point of discussion that I think will be central to one of the three themes that discussed between Netanyahu and Trump here over the next couple of hours. In terms of the ceasefire, though, which is holding, we are still in phase one, Yalda, of that ceasefire. Hostages are being released. It is a trickle, but they are coming out, and Palestinian prisoners are also being released from prisons in Israel. But we are still only at the beginning of phase one. So talks have started on the second phase now of the Gaza ceasefire deal. This is what we know about that at the moment. The initial plan, phase two, would see the release of all the remaining Israeli hostages in exchange for more Palestinian prisoners. There are still around 80 hostages in Gaza. It would also see the permanent end of fighting put into place, enabling the focus to turn to the rebuilding of Gaza, as I discussed. And in turn, phase two would see the withdrawal of all Israeli forces from Gaza. So an awful lot of steps still need to be taken. It is perfectly possible that this deal could fall apart. But remember, too, that Trump is now kind of owning this deal. So he needs to be seen to make it succeed. And he will place an awful lot of pressure on his friend turned foe turned friend again, it seems, Benjamin Netanyahu, who himself is also going to go home to Israel to fight an almighty political battle with the potential of elections in Israel very, very soon. So Netanyahu is going to want to tell Trump that he is the man that Trump should be backing, that he is the man that can deliver Trump the peace that he talked about in that clip you played just earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, a fascinating journey between these two men, certainly over the course of the last year. I remember in 2017, 2018, when Donald Trump went to Israel, Netanyahu said, you know, we see eye to eye to the point where we finish each other's sentences. Let's see how much they see eye to eye in the current climate. Mark, thank you so much. We're going to keep you there because, of course, we are waiting for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to arrive to the White House to be the first foreign leader to meet with Donald Trump since becoming president. So as soon as that happens, we will go back to Mark. But for now, thank you so much, Mark, for all of your analysis. Let's bring in our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who joins me here now. Dominic, I mean, there's so much to unpack there. I want to quickly get to the questions of Iran at the moment, because, of course, that is such an important piece. But I first of all want to touch on this issue of, you know, the people of Gaza being moved somewhere else while the Gaza Strip is being rebuilt. This is something that has turned into a reoccurring theme almost over the past few weeks. We heard Steve Witkoff say it just before Donald Trump was inaugurated. He said, we're talking about maybe moving these Palestinians to a place like Indonesia, for example. Donald Trump then repeated that and said, it's not somewhere that people should be living. And now we're hearing him say it again. I mean, it's frankly, first of all, a red line for the Jordanians and the Egyptians. They've never really wanted to open any borders to allow any Palestinians in. But secondly, more importantly for the Trump administration, this idea of normalization with Saudi Arabia is something that they want to achieve. And Saudi Arabia has already said, listen, we need a two-state solution if we are to go down the path of normalization with Israel.
Yeah, I mean, if there's an issue that is uniting the entirety of the Arab Middle East and the Persian, the Iranian Middle East, so Sunni and Shia, it is opposition to this, what they regard as a mad, a very dangerous idea that Donald Trump has been pushing. As you say, Stephen Witkoff is Middle East negotiator, but also Israeli ministers were quietly pushing this idea earlier in the Gaza conflict, that maybe other countries could take in Palestinians from Gaza. That would kind of resolve the issue. Trump saying it on a temporary basis. We did hear from Israeli diplomats and ministers sort of quietly saying this more permanently. But yeah, and there's a very good reason why Jordanians and Egyptians don't want this to happen, not least because they don't believe it's their problem, because they've taken in Palestinians in the past. And they've stayed there, particularly in Jordan, of course, not in Egypt, but in Jordan. And the Saudis also would see this as moving very much against a two-state solution. They want to see progress towards a Palestinian state if there's going to be further normalisation. The Iranians actually said that the Iranian foreign minister I interviewed a week or so ago, he said this is an idea that is quite old, but the Palestinians can't be deleted, they can't be edited out of the map. And he joked, well, maybe Israelis should go to Greenland. Maybe it's not Palestinians who should be ejected, it's the Israelis who should be ejected themselves. So kind of taunting and mocking Trump for that idea with an idea of his own. And I think, that what we're going to need to have answered, or certainly clues as to whether it's answered tonight, is Donald Trump serious about this, or is this actually a sop that he's helping Netanyahu throw to the far right to try and keep them placated? Because Netanyahu, as he goes into this meeting, as we're seeing from Mark there, the pomp and the circumstance kind of, I guess, underlies symbolically the importance of this meeting. What comes out of this meeting will certainly determine the course of the region, of the conflicts in the Middle East, in Gaza, but further afield as well for months, if not years to come. It's a crucial meeting. And going into that meeting, we have an Israeli Prime Minister who's stuck between a rock and a hard place. The rock is Donald Trump, who's pretty implacable in his opposition. He doesn't like this deal. His advisors have said, he said to the Israelis, why is this deal going to be over various levels? Why can't it just happen in one go? Get the hostages out and have a ceasefire. And then, so Netanyahu's got to persuade him that it is worth going through the various stages and that the deal will be done at the end. It won't fall apart. On the other hand, he's got to say to those on the far right of his cabinet, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, these are far-right Jewish extremists who would like to see Gaza empty to Palestinians and resettled, and their supporters would like to see that. He's got to keep both sides on board. So partly he will be saying to them, well, look what Donald Trump's saying about emptying Gaza. Isn't that going to keep you happy? But also, he's also well aware that they could jump ship, upend his coalition cabinet and undo his government. And he is quietly saying to them, or certainly according to reports in the Israeli media, this deal will never go to its final stages. And we will stay in Gaza and we will carry on fighting Hamas. And at one point, that bluff will be called, of course. Now, I think what Trump will say to him is, let's get the deal done. And then if Hamas come back, you can go back in as you are still in South Lebanon. But it's a very difficult tightrope act for Netanyahu to walk. He's an extremely formidable political operator, but this meeting's going to really challenge him because he's caught between these two very difficult positions.
And he's been able to, for the past 15 months, run rings around Joe Biden, for example, and keep, as you say, these right-wing, ministers within his cabinet sort of quiet, although they've threatened to quit at various different points, including if this ceasefire deal got over the line. The question is, does Donald Trump have any patience for Netanyahu's domestic politics and his issues there? Because on top of the sort of pomp and ceremony that we're seeing here today for Netanyahu, who, and I think we can show those, we are looking at some of those live shots coming in from the White House, there's also the kind of Donald Trump performance of this as well, the executive order, the sending Iran a very clear signal and warning shot. You're looking at those live shots now.
And putting out this honour guard. I mean, as Mark was saying, it is pretty. I've never seen this kind of reception for any leader in the White House. And they are pulling out the stops. So he's clearly sending a message. This is an important meeting. He is an honoured guest. But he's going to want to hear answers from Netanyahu. And their relationship has been difficult over the past, and it's going to be, I think, potentially quite a testy meeting. And as you say, if Trump has to decide between Netanyahu and a deal, he's going to choose the deal. If Netanyahu says, I can't deliver the deal, he may think, well, maybe another Israeli Prime Minister will. Trump is a deal maker, and he believes that he can bring peace to the Middle East, not just with the Gazans, but also ultimately a much bigger normalisation deal that was one of his great achievements, and certainly one of the achievements he's most proud of was this normalisation deal, the Abraham Accords, where Israel buried the hatchet with its long-standing enemies in the Gulf, Arab states who were prepared to normalise relations. He'd like to see that extended to Saudi Arabia. And I think he sees this as the beginning of that process. And yes, I think if you had to choose between the two, he will choose the deal. He wants to be a deal maker in the Middle East, and he wants to see how Benjamin Netanyahu can help him get to that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Dom, we are going to keep you there. And of course, we will go to Mark Stone, who's outside the White House, as soon as we see Benjamin Netanyahu, because, of course, this is the story we are following here this evening. But we're just going to shift the gear a little bit and look at some of Donald Trump's other policies, because, of course, from diplomacy at the White House to Donald Trump's economic threats through tariffs, of course, the president has given Mexico and Canada some breathing room, pausing their tariffs while going ahead with China's today. So what's the trade standoff looking like? Well, as part of his sweeping policies, President Trump announced extra 10% tariffs on all imports from China. They've since hit back at the US with counter tariffs of their own. They've put 15% tariffs on US coal and natural gas products and 10% tariffs on crude oil, farming equipment and some cars, all things that the US relies on China for. China have also started an anti-monopoly investigation into US tech giant Google. It's unclear what it will involve, but Google's been blocked in China since 2010 with limited dealings in the country. In addition, China have curbed the exports on a number of rare and precious minerals like tungsten that the US heavily relies on. That'll be a financial hit to a lot of production lines.
Nensha Port in Guangzhou, one of the largest and busiest in China. This is where Trump's trade war hits home. He's imposed a 10% tariff on everything China exports to the United States. And now China is hitting back.
China's tariffs are designed to send a message that it won't take threats from the United States lying down, that it can impose its own tariffs and sanctions and hit the US where it hurts by restricting some of the world's most important critical minerals.
China wants to show it is standing up to the US. In a statement, it said, the United States' imposition of tariffs on Chinese products exported to the US seriously violates World Trade Organization rules and is in bad nature. But Trump's not worried about that. He wants to punish China, blaming it for exporting chemicals to Mexican drug cartels to produce fentanyl. This is the drug which is fueling the US opioid crisis.
Methamphetamine and fentanyl opioid is really a game changer for...
Critics accuse China of not cracking down hard enough on it.
Just interrupting that report because, of course, we are following developments in Washington, D.C. And as you can see, Donald Trump, they're greeting Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who is the first foreign leader to arrive at the White House since Donald Trump became president. Let's see if we can have a little listen in or hear anything that they're saying.
All right.
So just a quick wave to the press there, and the two men have entered the White House, and no doubt we will see, Dom, a press conference at some point and images of the two men. We'll learn more. And of course, Donald Trump sort of has these impromptu press conferences in these situations as well. So we will no doubt see all of that. But Benjamin Netanyahu arriving as the first foreign leader, which is quite symbolic. I mean, the Israelis will sell this as, this shows how important we are to Donald Trump, how important this alliance, this friendship is. And they're hoping that, this will send a clear signal, not just to the region, but to the world.
Yeah, and Donald Trump knows exactly that. And he knows that the benefit, the political kudos you get from these pictures of Netanyahu being the first invitee to the White House. And Netanyahu's USP, his unique selling point to the Israelis, has for decades now of his political career been that he is the Israeli leader who can pick up the phone and get a meeting at the White House the next day or at Downing Street. No other Israeli leader has that kind of pulling power. And, we think of Israel as a very important country, of course, but if you're Israeli, you're in a small country, there aren't that many of you, you're in a region, you're surrounded by countries, many of which resent your very existence. So a leader who is able to punch above his weight diplomatically and geopolitically, that means a lot. And obviously with elections coming up, That is important to Netanyahu, and Trump knows that, and he's giving Netanyahu something in that respect, and he is going to want something back, and he's going to want to see progress towards a deal with the Gazans, progress towards normalisation, as we were saying, with the Gulf Arabs, with the Saudis, and also, ultimately, progress towards some kind of deal, potentially with the Iranians. And we heard some of the thoughts of the new president's mind on Iran in that impromptu kind of press conference he gave. You know, he's a president who kind of upstages his own press conferences. We're going to have a press conference with Netanyahu after this meeting. As you're saying, we may hear from them as they go into the meeting. As they come out, the protocol is ripped up with Trump. So anything's possible. But certainly before this meeting, we've heard pretty clearly from Donald Trump that he would like to throw the book at the Iranians if there's any chance of them trying to assassinate him again, because obviously American investigators believe that the Iranians did try and kill him before his election. They will be obliterated, he said, so he made that very clear. But also he is going to return to his maximum policy towards the Iranians of using particularly sanctions on oil sales to put pressure on them to bring about another nuclear deal and to restrain them from meddling across the Middle East. But while sort of, being very aggressive in that sense, he's also leaving open the possibility of a deal. He says, hopefully we won't have to use any of this. We'll see if we can get a deal. So it's a sort of double-edged thing. It's a big stick he's carrying, but also a bit of an olive branch there that will get minds, exercise minds in Tehran. They'll watch this very closely as anyone else will, this meeting, I think, of what comes out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Dom, we're going to keep you right there and go straight to the White House because our Mark Stone has been standing by. And Mark, we just saw those images, and I think we can show our viewers those images again of just a few moments ago when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived at the White House and was greeted there by Donald Trump.
Yeah, a big moment for Netanyahu. He will be thrilled that he is the first person, the first world leader to be here at the White House since Donald Trump's second term started. Not that many days away ago, but it has been a whirlwind. But the Middle East is the one thing that Donald Trump can point to as being a material success in just a very few days, in the sense that he, along with the Biden administration, the two of them working together, managed to achieve a ceasefire which saw hostages coming out, Palestinian prisoners being released, and the fighting paused. That is a dramatic success, and clearly how they develop on that is one key focus. I think three things that will be focused on over the course of the next couple of hours inside the White House. One is, as you were discussing, Iran. And Netanyahu has, through so many American presidencies, whether it's Obama, Biden, Trump one, and in fact, before that as well, he has been the lone voice, always saying to the American president, whichever one it is who is sitting in this White House, you have got to deal with Iran. And what he means by deal with Iran is take them out, take out the nuclear facilities, stop them from getting a nuclear weapon. And that will be his clear message to Donald Trump today. There's no question about that. What we will see, how Donald Trump reacts, how Donald Trump wants to, whether Donald Trump wants to take out Iran's nuclear facilities, because that might not fall in line with his peace plan, as he would see it, across the Middle East, because of the turmoil that it could prompt. That's the first issue. Normalization with Saudi Arabia. If you are looking for singular material successes in the first Trump administration, then you could point to the Abraham Accords. That was the historic peace deal that was done between Israel and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. It was extraordinary, it was historic, and it was brokered by the first Trump White House. And clearly Donald Trump wants to further that. The problem is what happened on October the 7th and the aftermath. Gaza, the Palestinians, that issue. And Saudi Arabia's red line for normalization with Israel is a Palestinian state, a two-state solution, which Netanyahu has pretty much said he does not want, and certainly the people within his own government that are keeping him in power, some of them absolutely don't want. So there is the catch-22 for Donald Trump. If he wants to get his normalization deal deal and create redraw the Middle East effectively, then he has got to somehow deliver a Palestinian state, and Israel there is the sticking block. So it's an almighty diplomatic challenge, I think, and to be a fly on the wall in that Oval Office right now, it would be fascinating indeed. But we will, as you say, get a news conference after the Oval Office meeting. And if Trump news conference is anything to go by, it will be free-flowing, and we may get many headlines out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thank you so much. And we will be speaking to you a little later in the programme. And Dom, we will be speaking to you shortly too. Let's focus again on the trade talks with China, the trade war that we've seen unfold. China today responded to the Trump tariffs with export controls on minerals that make high-tech products work. These are some of them considered essential to American economic and national security because they run everything from smartphones to drilling equipment and even missiles. China's mastered the refining and export of these minerals. Just take tungsten, for example. China deals with 70% of its global trade. This may explain why President Trump is interested in places like Greenland and Ukraine. Both have an abundance of mineral deposits. Could they be viable alternatives for a president reluctant to deal with China? Well, Bob Davis is a former senior editor at the Wall Street Journal and co-authored the book Superpower Showdown, How the Battle Between Trump and Xi Threatens a New Cold War. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme. I mean, if we just look at Beijing's response, it's been robust and it feels like it's been measured. And it does also feel like there is space for negotiations. But in many ways, it feels also like Back to the Future, like we have been here before.
Well, we certainly have been here before, but just something on Beijing's response, I would say at the moment it's more bark than bite. The U.S. doesn't buy those critical minerals directly from China. What they do is they buy them in components that are made by other companies. So it sounds tough, but it actually really isn't, because the U.S. companies can buy the components with those critical minerals from other companies. So at the moment, I think it's kind of each side, talking hard, talking tough, but so far it's pretty minimal, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, talk to us about the kind of message that China is trying to send here, and if it's holding back because ultimately it thinks, well, OK, if Donald Trump really does bite, that's when we should show our cards. For now, let's just see how this plays out.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at the moment. I mean, when the tariffs came into effect, the White House also said that Trump was going to be talking to Xi Jinping within the next few days. After he talked with the leaders of Canada and Mexico, the tariffs disappeared. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what you see, come out of a Xi-Trump discussion also, where, Xi can talk about the sort of things that he's doing to try to reduce the exports of chemicals that wind up in fentanyl. So, I mean, we're seeing the opening rounds. There certainly will be trade battles between the U.S. and China, but this is very much, I think, opening round.
And I guess, is China also, just being cautious because that's how China operates, and it just kind of wants to see, that it doesn't do anything that ends up hurting itself?
Sure. I mean, that's always the case with tariffs, with retaliation. The question is, how much are you hurting your own industry as compared to how much are you hurting, the other guy? But yeah, I think they're being very careful, very cautious, because they don't want to set off another round of trade fights and trade war. I mean, it was 2 years of U.S.-China relations in the first administration, and so I think they're waiting to see what Trump really has in mind, for this time around.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, when we think back to that meeting, back in 2019 or 2018, I believe it was, when, he had that kind of pomp and ceremony, rolled out the red carpet for Xi Jinping, and then, over tea, told him that he'd launched a series of airstrikes on Syria, for example. And then, after all those niceties, he then launched the trade war against China. So no doubt China is going to approach all of this a little bit more cautiously this time round, because they do have experience with Donald Trump.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I mean, I think that when he launched those missiles, it was actually 2017. It was only a few months after Trump had been in the White House and invited Xi Jinping to Florida to meet with him. It was, and it was a reminder of American power, certainly a reminder of American power, but also something to remember. In the first year of the Trump administration, they took no trade actions on China because they were trying to recruit Xi Jinping to help out on North Korea. These days, what Trump is trying to do is recruit Xi Jinping to help on Ukraine, to get a settlement with Russia on Ukraine. So there's a lot of things other than trade going on between the U.S. and China, and both leaders are quite aware of that.
Yeah, and I guess in many ways, when you think about Donald Trump as a leader, when he looks around globally, he would see Xi Jinping as a counterpart, as an equal, as someone who, in many ways he respects and, in his own way doesn't necessarily want to also take on, despite the kind of strong words that he continues to use.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think for all that I just said, I think there will be a trade, big trade battles between the U.S. and China. I just don't think we're at that moment right now. I think this was, a sort of scattershot moment. The United States doesn't even have all its, people involved in trade confirmed in an office yet. I think these are not quite a distraction, but something different than what we'll see in the coming years between the United States and China.
Bob, it's really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
This is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Next up on the programme, Tremors in the Med. People flee Santorini and several nearby islands. We'll speak to a tour guide.
we've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back to the programme. It's far from peak tourist season on Santorini and nearby Mediterranean islands, but many of those who are there are now scrambling to leave. Hundreds of earthquakes and tremors have been rumbling every few minutes in recent days. Visitors and many locals have been rushing to get ferries and planes to Athens. Schools on Santorini and surrounding smaller islands like Los and Anafi have been ordered to close until Friday. Seismologists don't expect things to settle for days or even weeks. Well, joining me now is Kostas Sakaravash, a tour guide who's lived on the island for 18 years and has fled with his family. Thank you so much, Kostas, for joining us here on the programme. Just tell me a little bit about these tremors. It's quite extraordinary, the fact that there have been hundreds in the space of just a few days.
The truth is, normally what we are used to is a big earthquake happening, and then the world experiences the aftershocks. In that case of Santorini, we have several earthquakes, non-stop, very mild ones, not of the kind that will make things falling off. But this is something, that indeed is happening now for days.
I guess it's alarming enough to force many people like you and your family to leave because, of course, even if they are small, you're just not quite sure whether they are going to turn into bigger ones.
It's first of all nerve-wracking to have every few minutes some tremor happening, even though if it's not a very devastating one, it keeps you constantly tense. Plus the noise. There is always that noise that comes with an earthquake. And after experiencing dozens of them at home in Santorini, since the schools would be closed for the coming days, we just decided to come to the safety of Athens. As a precaution more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, for those who haven't been able to get out or are staying on the island, what are the authorities advising them to do?
To stay calm and see how the things will evolve. I have a feeling now that, increasingly more people are leaving the island, as the thing does not show slowing down for the now. Our hopes are, or in my brain, I have built that way that we are supposed to be back next week, that things are going to go back as they were.
Yes, because seismologists say, look, it's not going to calm down for a few days. So you think regardless of that, you're going to still try and go back and live your life normally, even if the tremors don't stop?
No. Once they announce that schools can safely open, that will be the moment for me and my family to go back. I guess announcing the opening of the schools is also a sign that things are back to normal.
Yes, indeed. Well, we hope you and your family and all those people who have been forced to evacuate get home safely. Thank you so much, Kostas, for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, imagine standing up to paramilitary thugs, knowing it would likely cost you your life. That's the focus of a 13-minute Oscar-nominated short film which depicts the tense build-up to a massacre during the Bosnian War in 1993. Here's a look at the man who could not remain silent.
Vodika! Ajde, debeli, ajde. Što to radite? Ja nemam dokumenta.
Well, the film's director, Nebojša Slijepečević, joins me now. Thank you very much, Nebojša, for joining us here on the program. I was just earlier watching the film. It's filmed beautifully, and there's a lot of tension in it. Just talk us through that build-up of tension that you created.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. Well, the film is based on a real event that happened 30 years ago, and I tried to be as truthful as the event as possible. So I read thousands of pages of documents, different documents from court trials and from interviews, and distilled it into these 13 minutes. And the situation in the film is very specific for Bosnian War, but also very universal, I think, something that I could identify with, and I think everybody can identify with, because this is the situation of when you're witnessing a violence that is not intended towards you, but so you're just a bystander, and you have to decide what you will do. And this decision is incredibly hard, and that's what gives, I think, the suspense of this film, because that's something all of us can identify with.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly captures the bravery of this one man who knows that, you know, how risky this situation is, but also finds himself not able to, as the film's title says, stay silent.
Yeah, in real life, only one man dared to oppose the paramilitary troops that entered the train. And this man, his name was Tomo Buzov. He did something incredibly brave, but that costed him his life. He lost his life together with 18 other passengers. But he saved one passenger. You know, he in the end saved one life. So his death was not in vain. You know, he did something heroic.
Yeah, and I guess the universal element that you're talking about, you know, many often think about the fact that if they were in a situation like this, even if it means they could end up dead, would they speak up, or would you just stay silent and allow a massacre or something as horrific as this to unfold?
Yeah, well, that's a big question, and I guess nobody knows until you find yourself in the situation. And my film focuses actually on another passenger who is played beautifully by great Croatian actor Goran Bogdan. And this other passenger, he really thinks until the last second that he will do something, because he wants to oppose the attackers, he wants to save the other passengers, but then in a very moment when he needs to react, he gets very scared. And that is very human, something I can identify with very well, you know. But then there is a question, when the situation finishes and you go safely back to your home, how do you look yourself in the mirror next day? That's the question this film asks in the end.
Yeah, and just doing the research for this, you know, just talk us through a little bit about that, just the interviews that you did with some of the surviving characters, like the one that you just mentioned. You know, were you able to not just speak to them about the incident itself, but go deeper into their mindset?
Well, the first thing I did before even I started to write the script was to locate the son of the lead character of Tomo Buzov. His son is living in Belgrade. I located him on Facebook and asked for a permission to write a script with his father as a character in the script. And when Darko Buzov, when he gave me his permission, that's when I started writing, you know. But also Darko offered his help with whatever he can do. So he gave me, I talked to him about his father and about his motivation. And also I got the court trials, because some of the killers from that train were caught and put on trial. And then on these trials, many people who were witnesses of the crime, who were on the train on that day, they gave their first-hand testimonies. And I based the script on these bits and pieces from these testimonies. So all the dialogue that you see in the film, most of the dialogue is taken from the real life. So most of the sentences, some of them very horrible, were said on that day in that train.
Did you find that there was, of all the witnesses and people who gave testimonies, there was anything that sort of was quite similar, even though it was coming from different perspectives? Did they look at this one character who did stand up and think he's very brave, or was there something, a theme in it that you thought, that many could relate to?
Well, it was 30 years ago, so it was very hard, to find now with this distance very specific details. So I had to in the end, to write a fiction. If I could, I come from a documentaries, and if I could find excellent witnesses today, then I would probably do a documentary on the topic. But now I just took some parts from the real life and wrote a fictionalized script that is based on the real life. But still, most of other characters are only inspired by real people.
It's a great film. Like I said, I watched it a little earlier. Really, really dramatic, and captures the essence of everything that you've spoken to us about. Nebojša, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, as we've been reporting, we are following Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to the White House, where he has been meeting with Donald Trump. He is the first foreign leader to make that visit. And just in the last half an hour or so, we saw these images of Donald Trump welcoming Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House. I have with me our International Affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, who is here with us for more analysis. And Dom, one of the things that Donald Trump did ahead of Netanyahu's arrival was sign a series of executive orders, almost in this symbolic way of sort of, which indicated to us, the priorities of this meeting. No doubt Iran was top of the agenda. We've spoken a little bit about how, the Israelis expect or hope that Donald Trump will handle Iran during his presidency. But just in the last week or so, you have been to Tehran, a very rare trip. The last time Sky News, I think, was in Tehran was like 13 years ago. And you sat down exclusively with the foreign minister. Just give us a sense of how they sort of approach the idea of a Trump presidency and their dealings with Donald Trump and their attitudes towards how the Israelis will be dealing with Donald Trump.
Yeah, the first time we've been there for 8 years, but the first time we broadcast from there in 15 years, I think. So it gives a sense of, it's a very hard country to get into, and I think a sense of a changing mood there, and a sense that the Iranian government feel they have to get their message out because they have this man in the White House who has been seen as their arch nemesis. Donald Trump reneged on the nuclear deal, ripped up America's signature on it in 2018, but also killed Qasem Soleimani, their great sort of heroic leader of what they call the Axis of Resistance. But he's now in the White House and he's saying a couple of things. He's saying he wants to have a nuclear deal on his terms. Didn't like the first deal that was done by Barack Obama. But he wants to have a deal. It would be nice to have a deal, but he says he would prefer that to what he might have to do instead if there is no deal, which is to support Israel striking Iran's its nuclear facilities, which the West believes to be military. So the Iranians are sitting there knowing that they've got this happening, they've got this double-edged message from Washington, but also knowing that they are at the weakest they've been for a long, long time. They've seen that axis of resistance, its leaders, its forces decimated, Hamas weakened, Hezbollah weakened, Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah assassinated, Bashar al-Assad, their great ally in Syria, toppled from power, but also at home domestically they're very weak as the economy, 50% inflation. And in that sort of round of missiles that we saw last year, the Israelis in their latest attack probably completely dismantled, or certainly they claim to have dismantled Iran's air defences. So they're very exposed. So going to that meeting, Israel's Prime Minister is under pressure from those in Israel. So you've gone on about this Iranian threat for years, as Mark Stone was saying there. This is the golden moment. We will never have an opportunity like this to strike Iran. And the Iranians I was talking to are well aware of that. And therefore, from Abbas Araghchi, the Iranian foreign minister, we had this stark warning saying it would be a very bad disaster for the region if Israel and America were to strike Iran. And he said it's such a crazy idea, he actually doesn't take it very seriously as a threat. But also saying that, yes, maybe they are open to listening to Donald Trump. So a glimmer of possibility there from the Iranians. And ahead of this meeting with Netanyahu, we had Donald Trump saying, yes, a deal would be a nice idea, but also